Hello everyone, my name is Uthra Rajgopal and I'm an independent curator with a specialist interest in South Asian textiles and dress. Thank you very much to the Grosvenor Gallery and to Zara for inviting me to take part in this conference. I am going to take you through the South Asian textile collection at Manchester and specifically highlight some of the new acquisitions that I made for the Whitworth. I'm also going to stop my video so that you can just see the slides. So the Manchester Partnership consists of three cultural institutions: Manchester Museum, the Whitworth and Manchester Art Gallery. The bulk of the South Asian textile collection is at the Whitworth. However, there are some textiles from Nagaland still housed at Manchester Museum. And there is the main collection of dress that's housed at Manchester Art Gallery. There are approximately 900 or so textiles that can be classed as South Asian at the Whitworth, out of a total of about 20,000 textiles. The textile collection at the Whitworth is the second largest in the UK, the first being at the V&A. So it's an important site for exploration and for research for those people who are interested in knowing more about South Asian textiles. And of course, Manchester being the heart of Cottonopolis in the Victorian era, textiles were very important to the identity of Manchester, and so textiles has always played a really important part in the collections in the Manchester Partnership. I should also say that Manchester Museum is currently in the process of building a new South Asia gallery, which is due to open in autumn 2022. And as part of that gallery, there will be a sculpture terrace that is being supported by the Rangoonwala Foundation. So typically, the textile collection at the Whitworth is split into woven, printed and embroidered pieces, and that carries through into the South Asian textile section. So on the left hand side, what you see is a fragment of mushroom cloth that was collected in the late 1800s. And the reason why fragments such as mushroom and the fragment that you see in the center, which is a chintz, the reason why those fragments were collected was really to profit the textile manufacturers of Lancashire, of Manchester. And so pattern, colour, weave construction were all of keen interests to the merchants. And so in the early days when the Whitworth was first founded, it was actually set up as an institute of art and design to promote these designs and to promote technical innovation, if you like, amongst the merchant class. But also it was meant to be a place where the people of Manchester could come and see the great riches of the city, and of course many of them coming from the empire. On the far right-hand side, you have an example of a lovely fulkari that was collected about 100 years ago now. It's one of those pieces that was collected as a result of, again, the intrigue and the interest in the pattern and the technique. And so what's happened is that you have a dislocation of the cultural context of some of these cloths and these fabrics and what they meant to different communities and identities. The center, I said, is an example of some chintz fabric, and that's quite an important collection that's housed in the volume of the Forbes Watson selection of fragments and strips of cloth that were collected into a vast number of volumes. And this particular website, the Textile Manufacturers of India, has digitized the entire collection, and there are approximately 700 samples of cloth that have been collected and catalogued from all over the subcontinent. So it's still very much a rich resource for research and for people who are interested in knowing more about how collections were built at the time of empire. So I would definitely recommend this website to you. And the reason why it says the Harris Museum and Art Gallery at the top is because that was the gallery that oversaw the project of digitization of these actual Forbes Watson pieces. So do have a look at that. Another example of South Asian dress, as I said, can be found at Manchester Art Gallery. This is a banyan, approximately dating to 1760. It's block printed, as you can see by the details on the far right, and it's also been hand stitched, quilted and tailored. We believe it was made in India, very, very likely to be for a person who was a very high rank. We don't know who it belonged to, but it's fair to say that the oldest surviving examples of South Asian textile and dress tend to be those that belong to very high ranking individuals, royalty, the Nawabs, the princes, people who were very high up, shall we say, in the East India Company as well. So when the Whitworth opened in 1889, they had a substantial collection of South Asian textiles that really served the empire and the industry, the textile industry, and obviously profited and exploited the empire. And so what happened as the Whitworth continued to grow and develop in the late 90s and in the early 2000s, the previous curators, Jennifer Harris and Frances Pritchard, made substantial acquisitions to the textile collection to bring in the voice of contemporary textile art. And one of the acquisitions they made was Ruby Chisti's Crows, and that came into the Whitworth in 2000. Having said that, there was definitely a concentration on Western contemporary textile art as opposed to South Asian contemporary textile art. And so fast forward to 2017, and we had a big moment in Manchester when the whole of the partnership was involved in promoting contemporary South Asian art in the mainstream of programming across the board. So all of the institutions had a huge variety of exhibitions that were on at that time. And this is just a flyer of the variety of exhibitions that were on, and I hope that some of you managed to come to Manchester at that time. So as a result of that big push in 2017, when I was at the Whitworth at that time, I came in as a specialist on South Asian textiles, And so I made acquisitions for the Whitworth because there were a lack of specifically Jamdani textiles that I was looking for. So I went over to India. At that time, I wasn't able to go to Bangladesh. And I acquired a number of saris that highlighted this very skilled craftsmanship of Jamdani. And these pieces were acquired from Pooja Swaikar at Indian Story in Goa. And you might be thinking, well, Goa isn't really a centre for textile heritage or weaving, and that was my first thought when I was went out to meet them. But then it transpired that this is an organization that have a really close working relationship with a number of significant old crafts people from across the subcontinent, and they literally have to coax them out of retirement to weave these one-off beautiful pieces. So I was very lucky to not only collect cotton jamdanis, but also silk jamdanis, which you don't see very frequently. So on the left hand side is an example of a tussa silk jamdani, and I was fortunate enough to be given the opportunity to curate the exhibition Beyond Borders, which showcased these South Asian textiles that I acquired for the Whitworth. And it also gave me the opportunity to connect with Yasmin Jahan Napur, Risham Saeed, Kona Foundation, and Raisa Kabir. And so these four artists were brought together to give their contemporary voice and narrative to the collections, and to create a synergy between their work that went into the exhibition alongside the Whitworth's collection. So in this example, you see Poetic Staircase by Yasmin that has been hung in the foreground, and behind that the shadows are over two Jamdani saris. One is in tussa silk and one is in cotton, and it just made a really powerful and beautiful display. And as many of you know, will probably know that Yasmin in her work references a lot of the politics and the colonial displacement and exploitation of the East India Company, and particularly the relationship the East India Company had to the production of muslin in Bengal, as Bangladesh as it is now. This is another example of one of the display cases from Beyond Borders. This was actually co-curated by Risham Saeed, and she was very keen to bring in this story of empire. On the left, you have an Enfield rifle, and then you have some botanical prints and a little ceramic tea chest at the bottom, and alongside this beautiful hand quilted, hand stitched, block printed banyan that I showed you earlier. And at the back of this particular display case, we had up a poster from the Empire Marketing Board, really to kind of bring home that propaganda that was being pushed at that time, in even as when things became quite critical for Britain in the early 1900s, resulting in Gandhi's historic trip to Darwin and the Lancashire Mills. And of course, the hope was that he would stop boycotting British manufactured goods, in the hope that the people of Manchester and the people of the Lancashire Mills could take up their jobs. But of course it backfired, because the Lancashire mill workers really rallied around Gandhi and really responded to his own political ambitions at that time. And again, this is just to show you an example of how we used the existing collections to just bring a contemporary aspect. And this section relates to Raisa Kabir. For those of you who don't know Raisa Kabir, she's a British Bangladeshi artist. She lives and works in London, but she was born and brought up in Manchester, and a lot of her practice involves studying the weaving practices of different communities, displaced communities from Bangladesh, where she travels to frequently and does a lot of field work. And Raisa is a textile artist, so everything she does is hand woven. This is one of her pieces that was acquired at the time of the exhibition Beyond Borders, and this piece is called It Must Be Nice to Fall in Love, and it's a hand woven textile artwork made from cotton and silk. The yarn has been hand dyed by the artist in cochineal, and then the whole thing has been constructed on a loom. And as you can see, there's this map of the Indian subcontinent, and the frayed red threads that you can see spilling over the edges and spilling down the length of the work as well is a very deliberate process that Raisa talks about as a process of unweaving, and it literally feels like she's referencing the blood that has been spilt during the colonization of this geographical region, and the blood that is still being spilt and is continuing today in all the upheavals and political tensions. As a result of all of that work that I did in 2017 and working with so many great artists from South Asia and going out to India with Maria Balshaw and seeing the scene of contemporary textile art out there in South Asia, I thought, wouldn't it be great to build that collection for the Whitworth? So I applied for the Art Fund New Collecting Award, and I was really lucky to get the award. And I was paired up with a great mentor, Dr. Shona Dutta, who some of you may know. She was at the Peabody Essex Museum in Massachusetts and was instrumental in building up the collection of South Asian contemporary art at the British Museum. So I won this award in 2019. And as a result of that, I was able to buy a number of acquisitions for the Whitworth. So I'm just going to take you through some of the acquisitions very quickly. This is a piece by Arshi Irshad Ahmadzai. She was until very recently living between Afghanistan and India, but of course now she's in India. And this piece is called An-Nisa 2. It's made on cotton or Kora fabric that she buys from locally sourced markets. And it has ink calligraphy work on it as well as stitch work. And Arshi does a lot of work referencing the position of the female, of the woman in the domestic and the public space in the context of her cultural and religious upbringing. So you'll see references in the script, in the images and the icons that are on this piece. This is now up on display at the Whitworth. It's the largest, it's what, well, I think, yeah, it's one of the largest pieces that she's ever made. So the Whitworth were really lucky to acquire this. Another piece that I acquired was some lovely little Kantha works from an organisation called Art Pro, who are based in Dhaka, and they work with a group of women artists who came up with these beautiful little works, and they were very evocative because at the Whitworth we have a huge number of children and education programs and festivals that go on throughout the year. So it was really important to speak to that audience as well. And there's something very naive and playful and delightful about these Kantha pieces. So there were quite a few of these that were collected. This work is from Rahana Mungi, who is based in Lahore. And I was really intrigued by her work. And although she has a background in miniature painting, her work took on a really, really fascinating and interesting dynamic turn when she started to use her own hair and stitched it into these amazing trompe-l'oeil images, these sort of graphic images. And I was really taken by the way she talked about pain and loss, and that idea of strength being something that is so embedded in hair, as opposed to, you know, fallen hair that we see as weakness, and that idea of hair as a signifier of women's beauty in particular. This was a piece by Yasmin Jahan Napur. It's called Unity of the Untitled. Again, if you were lucky enough to be at the Whitworth in 2017, it was on display at that time. It will go back on display at some point, but I don't know when. These honeycomb pockets, if you like, speak of the emptiness and the lost voices and all those weavers whose voices were lost and written out of history when the East India Company dominated this area of Bengal. So this is, again, a very powerful piece that speaks of this history and speaks to the history of the Whitworth collection. Rakhi Paswani is from India. This is a piece that I thought was fantastic. It was using a man's handkerchief as a starting point, and inside the handkerchief in the center, there has been inserted this oilcloth, and it has this pinkish hue to it. And then there's this wonderful hand-stitched embroidery work of an underarm, a female's underarm, and I just loved the whole controversy and discomfort of this idea of a man's handkerchief being kept and secreted on certain intimate parts of the man's body, in his pockets or in his breast pocket, and mopping his brow, and then in the center this woman's underarm, this hairy armpit on his face. I just thought there was something really quite delicious about all of that. So I was very delighted to have acquire this piece, and this was part of a series that she did. And Rakhi is represented by the Guild Gallery in Mumbai. In terms of the British South Asian artists, Bartley Palmer's work called Coronavirus in Black and White, which is actually a diptych in the form of an embroidery, has now been acquired. These are images of her works in progress, and her work will be going on display soon at the Whitworth. And it's a fantastic piece that really speaks of the time and really references and positions South Asia and the impact of the coronavirus, not only on South Asia, but also people here, of the diaspora who live here. So it's a really great work, and it works incredibly well as a diptych. And just to let you know that Bartley Palmer is opening a show at the Textile Biennial at Blackburn on the 1st of October. So I would recommend that you go and see her work there as well, if you can. Kungan Aurora, delighted, absolutely delighted to have her work in the collection. Kungan is based in the UK. Again, she's a fantastic designer and brings this voice of design that the Whitworth has. So many, contemporary and historically British designers in their collection. So it was fantastic that Kungan was not only able to bring this work to the Whitworth in terms of the piece that you see on the left hand side, which was recently at the William Morris Gallery as part of Studio Karam's intervention Distant Fellowship, but also on the right hand side we have acquired a rug that she designed for Rug Story, Floor Story, I apologize. So absolutely thrilled that she joined that whole wave of great British designers who are now at the Whitworth. Another artist that has been collected has been Suman Gujral. This piece is called All My Sorrows. And again, this takes the starting point of a man's handkerchief that actually belonged to her late father. Her mother and late father came from the Punjab, originally, now in modern day Pakistan. And those memories of partition are still very much in the family, in the sense that it's part of that family's history and journey of how they arrived in the UK. And this particular piece references the actual partition line between India and Bangladesh as it is now, and how these white spots that you can see on the cloth actually reference the line as you can see it from space, which is quite incredible. And then you can see there is barbed wire that Suman has captured in the process of dyeing this cloth. So again, this will be on display soon. And just to let you know, Suman and Raki were in conversation with me, hosted by the Guild Gallery, talking about their handkerchief work. So that's online if any of you want to know more about that. The last artist to speak about is Maddy Acharya Baskerville. Really delighted to have her work in the collection. This piece is called Here to Stay, and it's made out of found plastic, as well as an old shawl, a Kashmiri shawl that she cut up. And you'll see that there's also a wonderful Chinese motif that she has collaged onto this sculpture. Maddy works a lot with found materials that have been washed up on the shore to highlight the environmental crisis, but also she's originally from Calcutta and grew up over there, and uses the sea as a site for thinking and exploring her own cultural identity. Maddy has a solo show on at the moment at Dali and the Bear in Woodstock in Oxfordshire, which is on the doorstep of Blenheim. So if any of you are in that part of the world, do go and see. It's well worth having a look. And I've also written an essay for her catalogue. So that's it. Thank you very much. And thanks again to Zara and Grosvenor.